Welcome back to Dave Knows Comics for another How To Draw session. Today's episode is Wolverine. Now, I went ahead and sped this episode up. It took me a little under an hour, so I figured to make it a little more palatable by putting it at a little under a half hour. If you want me to just give you the video no matter how long it is, normal speed, then let me know in the comments. Now, when I started this, I didn't really know who I was drawing, so I didn't know it was going to be Wolverine in the beginning. It just eventually morphed into that, as you will see. So, the point of this was really just to show you not so much Wolverine, even though you will see that eventually, but more to see just the process of drawing things out and seeing how you feel and kind of moving in the moments. So, here I am just kind of playing around with things, doing more of a, less of a pre-draw and more just working on the skeletal outline, looking at where I'm going with this. So, I'm not 100% sure here. You put just drawing, so that's also one of the reasons why it took me a lot longer, because I'm playing with it. And I realized that arm is bizarrely shaped and is not in a normal angle that an arm should be at. So then I started drawing, so I just put it down and just started drawing at that angle. And and I just keep looking at it. So that's the process, because I think a big thing a lot of people forget about is just, and again, that arm looks a little strange, especially because I'm trying to keep it in frame. But you shouldn't do that. Draw the limb, draw the appendage at the appropriate size. And if it happens to run off the page, then let it run off the page. But don't force it to be cramped into that spot. So that's what I'm going to do. So, I think an important part about drawing is you get better at drawing. If you're trying to improve, and everybody can always improve, you can always learn something about drawing. And again, I realize that's not there, but I do really want that other fist in there. So I'm actually going to erase it and just change the angle again. And this is the part of drawing where it slowly started becoming Wolverine, because I didn't do it intentionally. I just kept moving that arm down, and as I did, it eventually got to this pose. And this pose, you just have to think of Wolverine. At least I do. Now, this is part of the fun of it, because when you worry about technical drawing or doing everything right, it kind of loses its appeal. It's not as fun to do. Oh, and now that I know it's Wolverine, I got to start making him a little wider, making him a little stockier. Giving him a little more bulk to his build. So I think this is the fun about drawing. Just kind of see where the wind takes you. Just draw and see how things are going. Learn to enjoy the process. Don't keep focusing on the destination and all the technical ability, because I actually knew someone. I used to work with someone in the entertainment aspect, not drawing wise, but in the entertainment field, that told me everything works like this. You have three major categories. You have your natural ability, you have your technical ability, and then you have the love of what you're doing. And all three of those things have to be in check and in balance. And the most successful you're going to be is when all those three things are balanced. So when you first start doing something, it's because you're naturally good at it and you want to pursue it. And then you get technically better at it, or you decide you want to get technically better at it by researching. And then you find out about all these techniques that you're not doing. And by finding out all these techniques that you're not doing, it starts diminishing your love of it, because you feel like you're not doing it right. And therefore, you stop loving it. And that's a problem. So learn technical ability, sure. But also make sure that your love for it doesn't subside. And your love subsiding can also affect your natural ability if you keep beating yourself up about things. And just like now, I realize the thumb's on the wrong side. So I do that once in a while. I have a... sometimes I have to remind myself where things go. So see, like that, because I'm just drawing shapes down and just enjoying. So really, do that. Enjoy your time. Now, drawing hands again. I know this is something tricky. I talk about it a lot because drawing hands is something that I think is very, very, very particular, and something that can be very time consuming. So for those of you who may not have seen, my whole process for drawing hands is drawing the shape of the fist and then working the fingers in, instead of trying to draw each individual finger to make a fist, because that'll drive you crazy. If you draw the overall shape of what a fist looks like, the outline, and then push the fingers in there, draw the fingers within, you're much better off. Okay, so as you can see, going back to the drawing specifically, you can see now it's fleshed out. I bulked him up a little bit more, got him a little wider. You can, and for his thigh and his calf on the right, our right, you can see I drew through it, so to make sure everything stays in proportion. I do that sometimes I don't. Definitely make that decision on your own, what feels more natural to you. But since I'm just kind of going over it, just guiding my way through it. I'm drawing a little bit differently just because I'm trying to figure things out. So when you don't have anything planned out, it's a lot easier to just draw over objects as you just layer the drawing on top, which is another part of the process. Some people like to layer their drawing on top, as I did here. And now I'm pretty confident that I'm committing to the idea that I'm drawing Wolverine. Now I can give him his distinct mask, and here's the fun. Now when it comes to drawing Wolverine's face, I think it's pretty easy because, you know, the wings of his mask, whatever you want to call these side panels, they're really the most distinguishing mark. But they lead down perfectly to the nose, and so you just put eyes on either side, just, you know, these little triangle-shaped eyes on the either side, and then you put a scowl on, and it's pretty simple. It's not that difficult. Oh, and here, the way I drew Wolverine's lower half, his lower torso, if you will. The way it comes down into the pelvic area works to create natural wrinkles. I noticed in his costume, in his shorts, and his trunks there. So those wrinkles, for fabric's sake, it's a lot easier to draw them because I had these guiding lines there. So when you had these bend points, if you will, like where the sockets, where elbows, where knees, if you're trying to draw cloth and you have problems drawing cloth material, you can kind of use where the joints bend as your guide to see where cloth would go, and it's an easy way, it's a natural way to start figuring it out and making things look more realistic. Okay, so I moved on to the pen. I think I've done enough in the pre-drawing and the gesturing statement. I think I've built off enough where I just want to go ahead and start inking. So I'm using one of my thin point pens here, which I really like using. And there's that little thing on the head. It's a little half circle with the two lines. I always draw that on Wolverine. It's not Wolverine until I've done that. Now I'm tracing over the muscles. Now, and one thing I tend to remember is when I draw shoulders, I try to draw them in clusters. There are three distinct clusters, sometimes two. That's how I make the outline. So I don't do just one big circle. It's a circle with two little clusters in there. And now for the abs. Now I know in the pre-drawing of the abs I did perfectly round abs, but here you can see I'm making these weird amorphous shapes, these weird dimples and all that, which I think is a little bit cooler. I think that's more fun, a way to draw abs. And here I'm moving to forearms. And what's great about Wolverine's forearms, and Wolverine, this is like Wolverine's pose. It's one of those things where it's not as exact 100% pose, but when you have the fist turned up and facing outwards, it's very Wolverine-like, and everyone knows that's a Wolverine pose. And the biggest key to sell it, though, it's not just the placement of the arms. For me, it's the forearms. It's the tendons in the forearms, because he's clenching his fists, and you get to see these, tense muscles, because that's, where his claws are coming from. So I think that's key. If you can really make these distinct lines in the forearms, if you have your fists, if you can draw your fists like this, and just make sure you have that, drawing those lines in the forearms are key, because that really shows his anger. It's kind of like clenched teeth, which, this Wolverine that I drew did not have clenched teeth. He just had this scowl. So he's not super mad, he's just kind of mad. But if you can really get those forearm lines down, you can see how he's ready for business. And it almost seems like he's tensing up his muscles so his claws are ready to come out. Alright, next on to the clavicle. A little divot here, working on the sides. Now, I'm also planning on doing something different when it comes to this drawing, because I'm experimenting and playing around a lot more. I want to do a few things a little differently. So I'm going to be using more equipment. Last time when I did the Joker drawing, you saw some of the equipment. You saw the equipment I like to use, but here I'm going to be playing around a lot more with effects and background information, and playing a little bit more. You'll see momentarily. But now I'm just going to get the drawing out. I'm just doing simple pen work. I'm going to make this a very, very simplistic drawing with the pen. It's going to be with the other materials that I'm going to be using. And again, going back to that idea of having your love for something not interfere with your natural ability, not lessening your natural ability or your technical ability, not diminishing your love of something. A big part of it is have fun with it. So when you have a lot of equipment, and even though this, very high-end professional art equipment, yeah, you'd think it could be kind of stiff, but there's a lot of it that's fun, and even though it may not be professional equipment, I recommend, and now I'm just erasing the pencil lines, so mostly, just to get it out of the way because I'm going to ink now. When it comes to, even though it's not professional, you could always try using some stuff like, and you know what, I'm going to try a different ink. I'm not going to try the really high-grade professional ink. I'm going to try a more watery Japanese-style ink that's going to be a little more transparent. It's not as thick. It doesn't leave as dark an imprint, so we can actually play with gray values and put multiple layers, because the more layers of this paint we put on, it'll be, or this ink will put on, it'll be a little darker. But anyway, sometimes I like buying, Crayola products, even though they're not professional grade, but because they're fun, because they're, and crayons. I think, by the way, light blue, I think is great. The crayons are great for drawing jeans, coloring jeans, just so you know. But, sometimes because it's fun, like, all these, like, they're art, but they're, like, kind of toys. And even though they may not be professional, they are fun to use, and you never know what you can do. Okay, so here I'm going to go to the inking. I'm going to be using a brush. And as I said, I switched over to a more watery style ink just because I want to be able to play with adding different layers and textures to it. And so if you have a lighter, thinner ink, you can do that, and it'll get you more of a brush look, as you're gonna see. So in order to do this and play around with it, now, again, I still have this thicker brush than I would like, so it's not going to have as much detail. But knowing that, you have to compensate for it. So look, when I'm using this thicker brush, I think it's great for, like, the knuckles, because instead of painting an outline or anything like that, I'm just kind of painting in the middle or a little off to the side, and it's creating this imprint. So it looks like it's shining on one side of the fist as I go in. And because of that, I'm creating a light source. So now we see that the light source is over to the left of that hand. So therefore, I'm just going to kind of keep that in mind by shadowing more on the right, airing more on the side of the right as I do the abs. Lighting is also tricky, and when you ink like this, using a lot of ink or using paint, then you can start figuring out more. It's easier to add a lot of ink and then dial it back on your next drawing and realize how light works. But really start thinking about it, because it's tricky, because there are different points of light. Where is this light coming from? That's up to you. So some things are going to cast a shadow, like, underneath always, and other things are going to not cast a shadow, even though they should, depending if there's a different light source. So just try to figure out if the light source is coming from above, behind, left, right, upper left, whatever. Upper right, you get the idea. Okay, so here I am, I'm just kind of committing and going for it. I'm playing around. As you can see, I tend to jump around a lot. I just kind of, when it comes to drawing or anything, I just jump back and forth going where I feel like going at that particular moment. I don't have this method of going from, beginning to end, top to bottom. I just kind of jump around. All right, so going for the mask. Now, the mask I want to be completely covered in black. And going for total coverage here. Okay. And now I'm just paying particular attention to the inside of the mask. And I have pointed this out before, but what's great about inks is they make things contrast the paper a little bit more. So contrast is good. People like contrast. Contrast makes things look good. Oh, and here I am working on the forearms, those tendons in the forearms really popping out by just doing some quick straight lines over it. We'll give you that. Okay. Also, you might notice from the lack of shoulder pads, I'm using Wolverine's brown costume, which I like and I think is underutilized, actually. So here we go. Now I'm filling it in. Now I'm kind of going for it. Where before I was playing it safe by adding the shadows to only specific key areas. Now I'm kind of feeling a little more comfortable with how this is looking, so I'm moving forward a little more aggressively. Oh, and as you can see here, occasionally the brush is drying out, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Don't think it is, because when the brush is drying out, and yeah, you'll know when you need more ink versus when you don't, but when it's drying out, you can get cool effects with it, as it's just kind of dragging and leaving ink in some places and not others. Oh, and here's those crease in the trunk areas, from where his legs are bending from the joint. So I think this is another thing that the brush excels at over pens, is that it's a lot easier to make these interesting shapes and creases. They look a little more realistic this way. Now, when I first put the ink down, you saw how much darker it is, and you might have noticed it start to dry up a little bit, and this is why we're getting this drying up, so if I put more ink on top of it, it gets a little darker. Okay, so now as I'm getting more aggressive with the ink, you can see this is it's kind of as Bob Ross would say, or as he used to say, this is your bravery test, you know, because once you start going really deep into this, there's no way back. So I'm really committing to the idea that this is going to be a mostly darkened costume. I'm going to be using a lot of shadow. It's not going to be very bright. Most of the drawing will be speaking through the fact that it's dark, cast in shadow. And so I committed. So yeah, once you do it, you kind of can't stop. You can't shade. You can't heavily shave just a certain part of his costume and then just leave the rest completely bright. That would look like, you know, just leave it like this. Now I couldn't do that. So I'm kind of committing to this. Or I have to commit to this. So here we go. And look at that little imperfection from that brush on the left side of his calf. It works because it's not perfect. It's not as straight as a pen would do. So use that. Use that to your advantage because it leaves a great texture. It leaves a great imprint behind it. It has a great effect to it. This is also good. I think inks are also good when you're painting them using a brush, good for creating metallic effects. This little squiggly roughness to it is a little metallic looking. It's not 100% metallic looking, but I think it almost seems like it could be shiny or reflective, if you will. You know, not that Wolverine has a metal costume, but I think it works. I think it works to have a sleekness to it, which I think is kind of cool. Even though Wolverine's brown costume, I kind of always thought of it as being like leather, but not, you know, X-Men the movie leather, like saddlebag leather kind of thing. Alright, and here, committed to shadowing. So now I know I have to shadow because of what I did on his torso. I have to do it mostly in shadow, so mostly shadow because I committed to it because of that bravery test, that commitment test. Okay. And as you note, I've left certain parts. Now, Wolverine's forehead and his head part, the middle part of his head, I left blank, and I just do that because that's Wolverine for you. Now, that's just the way his costume looks to me. I mean, yeah, I guess I could shadow it up too. I'm just not going to. And right there, I also noticed that in that little divot in between his neck and his shoulder, I needed to put a little ink there because it would cast a shadow. Okay, so now I switched over to a bigger brush, and I'm going to fill in these areas right here. Look at that, filling in the areas. Because this is a bigger brush, I can really get the major areas, the major darker areas that I'm looking for. And also, as it dries up, once again, look at this, I can use it. And notice when I'm doing those forearms, I pull in that direction to make sure it gives you that line, like in the tendons. I match the lines in the tendons. I'm not going horizontally, I'm going vertically to match the lines of tendons. And now the brush is kind of dried out a little bit. I could use it to add a little gray, so it's very faint levels of gray. Okay, I'm going to go back in and touch a few things up because I don't like the space between his abs and the sides. That should have a little bit more of an imprint, I realize. So there you go. And this line and the little bit of white underneath of his pectoral should be shadowed, but it's not. Now this just becomes the borderline of his pectoral, so now it just makes it pop out. And it doesn't stand out too much. You don't really think about it. But yeah, okay. So now moving on to the background, as I said, I want to play with the background more. So I'm going to take this bigger brush, this thicker brush, and I'm going to add highlights or lowlights this way, and I can strategically add from the last drawing, the full drawing I did with the Joker. You notice I used a tissue to stamp out the background, which is a lot of fun, but this time I want to place it with a little more accuracy, so I'm going to do this. But this is not going to be the background that I go to. This is just me using a lot of ink just to create this, and I'm going back to the tissue, but I'm using the tissue now to do this. Yes, yeah, there you go. I added it. Now I'm smearing all of this ink that I put in that strategic place. Now, since this is a war-based ink, it does dry a lot faster, so you kind of have to work fast with this, so, or else it's going to leave and work a little more permanently, especially on the Bristol paper, which I am using because it absorbs a little faster. Now, see, I'm going back on certain spots because I want to really use the tissue to gunk this place up. And also where you can see the brush strokes, I want to avoid that. I want to take it and smear them up because I don't want it to look like I used a brush. And whiteout pen, also key here because it's okay to go overboard. So I'm going to use the whiteout pen to just reestablish certain borders and outlines to make sure they stand out distinct from the background, which is cool. Oh, and I also forgot to mention this. In his trunks, you notice that I actually made it a little lighter on his trunks. I didn't go as heavy on the ink. Well, that's because I wanted to show the contrast of distinguishing his trunks from the rest of his costume. Okay, so here I am, just working on the border, just making sure, put things out. And I could also go in there and pop things out too, like that. Use that to create an extra level of shine. And also using it to draw a little bit, so you get his rib cage a little bit, or the side muscles. Muscles I don't have, but you know those. And going to retrace his bicep to make his bicep pop a little more. I mean his shoulders and his pectorals, and also using that shoulder line. As I said, I like making shoulders a group of muscles, so that's the best way to do it. All right, and yeah. Oh, and yeah. Let's help distinguish his leg from the background a little bit more. Okay. Now, with that being said, sometimes you go overboard with the whiteout a little bit, have to retrace with the pen to reestablish the thin border from the whiteout. It's all about these little things. Layering effects on top of each other is the best way to do it. Because if you stick to just one tool or one method, now sure, that's fine for the bulk of the drawing, but these little minor details, if you use multiple parts, multiple tools, it makes it harder to see one tool. So, like if I just used a brush and not the tissue in the background, it would have looked very obviously like a brush. And of course, got to give Wolverine that X belt. But by combining techniques, by taking that tissue and smearing the ink, you get a much better effect, or you get multiple effects, and it makes things look a little bit more unique or harder to pinpoint. And you stop seeing the tool and you start just seeing the drawing, which is I think very important. So remember, it's about getting the drawing down. It's almost a magic trick. You're not trying to see, the skeleton of how it's done. You're just trying to see the end result when people are looking at it. And so by combining effects or doing multiple things and going over things more than once, drawing something complete and going back and doing it again. And right now I'm doing what's called rendering. I'm drawing these little lines, hash lines, rendering lines, to add another dimension to the drawing, and also using it to make that X in the belt. I also realize now that the ab line is a little off. His abs are pointing a little more to the left than where the belt buckle is, but that's okay, because those things you don't really think about too much. And who knows if you guys would have noticed if I didn't say anything. Alright, so here we go. Working on the details of the arms and the forearms and the fist. And reestablishing that border because the whiteout alone won't do, so using the pen. I'm just adding a lot of small details here. Okay, alright, it's looking alright now. I think it could do a little bit better, so let's see what else we do. Let's work on this background a little more, if you will. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try something right now. I'm not gonna be happy with it, but I'm gonna try it. Going to try and use the ruler to create a cool claw effect, make my life easy. Just draw 3 lines. Now here's my thought process. Draw these 3 lines, and then go back with the whiteout pen, and then kind of like the way his fingers look, where it's part shadow, part light, and then that creates the effect. And I look at it, it's just too straight. That was not going to be that easy. I thought it was going to be that easy. It turns out it's not. So they come too straight out. I would have to draw them. So the specific angle he's at doesn't allow for this to happen. So I'm going to have to get rid of this, which I will. But instead, hey, let's work on something else. Let's move around. Let me cover it up. Okay, so yeah, I tried to cover it up because that didn't work. But that, once again, remember in the beginning, I said this is about experimentation. So here we go. Back to the tissue, back to covering this up. And I'm also going to just really, really smear more of the background. Really, really get into that background. You'll see why in a minute or so. I'm going to work to make the background a little bit more distinct, if you will. Okay, so filling in, and once again, this is the lighter ink, a little bit more watery, so it creates different levels of darkness. So it's not just it's not like deeper inks where it's just down, it's just down and just ink. That's it. I'm going right to the border here, and we're also seeing a layer. There's darker parts of this background than others just because I'm going over it. But you see, I'm working around it, and you notice by getting real close to Wolverine, but not exactly there, it almost creates this little glow, if you will, almost as if, almost like a mist, almost like little beads of water flashing off them. Okay, but I'm also again, don't be afraid to go over it again with the whiteout, as I am, just to make sure we keep those lines distinct. But yeah, so going real close to it almost creates a little bit of a glow, which I like. Oh, but I don't want it underneath them. I just want it up top. Okay, now, why? And since it looks like a mist, like little bits of water splashing up, why not add some rain? And this is a pretty cool way to add rain effects. You take an X-Acto knife and you use it backwards, upside down, not the cutting side to cut through, but the other side of it. And you take a ruler and you just go for it, and you create rain. On a black background, you create rain. That's how you create rain effects. As they bounce off, and with that tissue coming close, it almost seems like Wolverine's just caught in the rain. Now, you can do this all day long. I admit my rain's a little more diagonal than it probably should be, and you also can straighten this out and change it. You don't have to stick to a perfect parallel raindrops, because that's not how rain works. Change the angle every once in a while. But yeah, this is a really cool and fun way to draw rain. And again, it's about having fun. Like I said when I was a kid, this is the kind of thing, not using sharp objects when you're a kid, but still, this is the kind of idea of something I would like. Where you can make rain by doing something like this. I would say, cool, this is something that I would just, jump at. Because I just think it's such a great idea. But yeah, this is fun. This is how drawing is fun. It's a cool trick, and it's silly, and it's simple, but it's a fun thing to do, because you don't do it very often. So yeah, so there you go. There's Wolverine in the rain. If you guys want to see me draw someone next, let me know down in the comments. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And as always, Dave knows.